Meanwhile, we are getting reaction to President Trump's new executive order to tackle homelessness. He says he wants to make it easier for cities and states to stop people from sleeping on the street.
Over 1.2 million Americans are working full-time and sleeping in their cars. Not addicts, not unemployed. Teachers, drivers, nurses, warehouse workers. This isn't homelessness as you know it. This is America's working class collapsing in real time. America has crossed a historic line. Having a job no longer guarantees housing. In 2025, an estimated 1.2 million working Americans are living in their cars, vans, or other vehicles while holding full-time or near full-time employment. This is not a temporary glitch. It's a structural failure. According to labor data, over 60% of vehicle dwellers are employed, many working 40-plus hours a week. The term working homeless used to be rare. Now it's becoming normalized. This shift happened fast. Since 2020, housing costs increased at twice the pace of wages, while inflation erased real income gains. Even workers earning $18 to $25 per hour, once considered stable, are now priced out of basic housing in hundreds of U.S. cities. A one-bedroom apartment that cost $1,100 in 2019 now averages $1,800 to $2,200 in many metro areas. The most alarming part, this group is invisible. They don't sleep in tents, they don't line up at shelters, they park quietly, shower at gyms, and go to work every day. Because they don't fit the traditional image of homelessness, they are often excluded from official counts, meaning the real number is likely higher. This is no longer a crisis of unemployment. It's a crisis of affordability, and it's spreading into the middle of the workforce. Full-time work used to guarantee basic shelter. That guarantee is broken. The working homeless are not who most people imagine. They are teachers, warehouse workers, nurses, EMTs, retail supervisors, mechanics, delivery drivers, and office staff. Many have clean records, steady paychecks, and years of work history. What they don't have anymore is a rent they can afford. Surveys from major cities show that over 45% of vehicle dwellers previously had stable housing within the last 24 months. These are not lifelong homeless individuals. They are newly displaced workers. Many lost housing after a rent increase of $400 to $800 per month, a medical bill, a divorce, or a short job gap that wiped out savings. Single adults are heavily affected, but families are rising fast. In some school districts, 1 in 10 homeless students now live in vehicles, not shelters. Seniors are another growing group. Fixed incomes failed to keep up with property taxes, insurance hikes, and rent inflation, forcing older workers and retirees into cars. What connects all of them is math. Even at $22 per hour, a worker earns about $3,520 per month before taxes. After taxes, healthcare, gas, food, and insurance, there's often nothing left for $1,900 rent. The system quietly pushes them out. This crisis is not about personal failure. It's about basic income no longer matching basic survival costs. Cars didn't become homes by choice. They became the last affordable option. When rent consumes 50 to 70% of income, people look for survival alternatives. A used car payment of $250 to $400 per month suddenly looks affordable. Compared to rent, that resets every year higher. Living in a vehicle eliminates deposits, credit checks, and upfront costs. No first month, no last month, no $2,500 move-in fee. For millions, that barrier alone made apartments impossible. A vehicle offers mobility, privacy, and the ability to keep a job, at least temporarily. This is why vehicle living exploded after 2021. Data shows a 40% increase in vehicle dwelling in major metro areas within 4 years. Workers sleep in cars to stay close to work zones they can no longer afford to live in. Commutes of 90 minutes become impossible without housing nearby. But this solution is fragile. One ticket can be $100 to $300. One tow can cost $800 to $1,500. Miss one day of work, and the entire setup collapses. Unlike renters, vehicle dwellers have no legal protections. What started as a short-term workaround is becoming long-term reality. Cars are now functioning as America's unofficial housing tier, and cities are responding by banning it instead of addressing why it exists in the first place. This crisis didn't happen accidentally. Since 2020, Rents increased 30 to 45% nationally, while wages rose closer to 15 to 18%, much of it erased by inflation. In real terms, millions of workers are poorer today than 5 years ago. Housing costs exploded due to multiple forces: institutional investors buying single-family homes, zoning restrictions limiting new construction, short-term rentals removing long-term supply, and rising insurance and property taxes passed directly to renters. Meanwhile, wage growth stalled, especially in retail, logistics, caregiving, and service sectors. In over 60% of U.S. counties, a full-time worker earning minimum wage cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment at market rates. Even workers earning $25 per hour now struggle in many cities. Housing is no longer priced for labor, it's priced for capital. Landlords adjusted rents annually. Workers don't get annual raises that match housing inflation. This mismatch is permanent, not temporary. Each year pushes more people out. The result is predictable. People don't suddenly stop working, they stop affording homes. And when housing becomes optional, but work remains mandatory, vehicles fill the gap. This is not a market correction. It's a structural extraction of housing from the working class, happening in plain sight. Mass layoffs turned an affordability crisis into a housing emergency. Between 2023 and 2025, the U.S. experienced over 1.2 million layoffs, concentrated in tech, logistics, healthcare support, retail management, and manufacturing. Many affected workers found new jobs, but not fast enough to keep housing. High interest rates made recovery harder. Credit card APRs hit 20 to 29%, auto loans climbed above 8 to 10%, and emergency borrowing became unaffordable. A single missed paycheck now triggers cascading failure: late rent, eviction, credit damage, then displacement. Unemployment gaps of 30 to 60 days are enough to permanently remove workers from the rental market. Once evicted, many cannot pass background checks or meet income requirements again, even after reemployment. Layoffs no longer mean time off, they mean housing loss. And because housing supply is tight, re-entry is nearly impossible. Workers end up sleeping in cars while employed, stuck in limbo. This is why layoffs now translate directly into vehicle living. The margin for error is gone. One disruption equals collapse. The economy still counts these people as employed, but their lives tell a different story. They work full-time while homeless, invisible to statistics, and unsupported by safety nets designed for a different era. For decades, America relied on a simple housing ladder: studio to one-bedroom to family home. That ladder is gone. Between 2020 and 2025, the number of sub-$1,200 apartments dropped sharply in most metro areas. Developers stopped building starter units because luxury housing delivers higher returns with fewer regulatory risks. In many cities, studios that once housed entry-level workers now rent for $1,600 to $2,000. Single-room occupancies, extended-stay motels, and low-cost month-to-month rentals are being demolished, converted, or rezoned. What used to absorb temporary hardship no longer exists. Zoning laws make it worse. Many cities ban micro-units, shared housing, or multi-adult rentals, effectively outlawing affordable density. As a result, workers earning under $50,000 per year are pushed out entirely, not downsized but displaced. This creates a housing cliff. There is no cheaper option to fall back on. Once rent exceeds income, the next step isn't a smaller apartment. It's a vehicle. That's why car living is exploding among newly displaced workers. The disappearance of starter housing didn't just reduce affordability, it removed the recovery path. Once someone loses housing today, there is no lower rung to grab. The bottom of the housing market simply disappeared, leaving millions with nowhere to land. As more people turn to cars for survival, cities are responding not with solutions, but with enforcement. Since 2022, dozens of municipalities have expanded overnight parking bans, anti-camping laws, and vehicle dwelling restrictions. These laws often pass quietly, without public debate. Fines range from $50 to $300 per citation, but the real threat is escalation. Multiple tickets can lead to warrants, license suspension, or vehicle impoundment. Towing fees alone often exceed $1,200, instantly wiping out months of savings. The contradiction is brutal. Cities acknowledge housing shortages while criminalizing the only shelter people can afford. Many areas enforce bans even when shelters are full or unavailable, creating an impossible situation. Leave, but go nowhere. Workers living in vehicles are especially vulnerable. They can't risk citations near their jobs, so they move constantly, losing sleep and stability. Constant displacement increases stress, fatigue, and job loss risk. These laws don't reduce homelessness. They shuffle it invisibly. People move farther from work, deeper into industrial zones, or into unsafe areas to avoid detection. In effect, survival itself is being treated as a crime. And once criminal records begin to form, escaping homelessness becomes even harder. The punishment for being poor is becoming poverty itself, enforced through citations and impoundment fees that guarantee deeper instability. The working homeless live in a different reality than traditional street homelessness. They remain hidden by design. Most sleep in cars, vans, or SUVs, rotate parking spots, and avoid visibility. Many maintain hygiene through gym memberships, workplace bathrooms, or truck stops. Because they are employed, they avoid shelters. Shelters often have curfews that conflict with work schedules, lack storage for tools or uniforms, and pose safety risks. For someone working a night shift or 12-hour day, shelters are simply incompatible. This invisibility creates a dangerous data gap. Traditional homelessness counts rely on shelters and street surveys. Vehicle dwellers don't show up, so the crisis is severely underreported. In some cities, officials estimate real numbers may be 2 to 3 times higher than official counts. The working homeless are also less likely to receive aid. Many programs require proof of street homelessness or shelter stays. Having a card disqualifies them, even though they have no home. This group is the backbone of essential services, yet completely unsupported. They keep cities running while quietly living in parking lots. The system treats them as housed because they work and homeless because they don't qualify for help. They exist in a bureaucratic blind spot, neither employed enough for stability nor visibly homeless enough for assistance. For the working homeless, the vehicle is everything. It's shelter, transportation, storage, and job access. Losing it is catastrophic. A single tow can cost $800 to $1,500, not including tickets or daily impound fees. Most working homeless cannot absorb this shock. Miss one paycheck and retrieval becomes impossible. Once the car is gone, the job usually follows within days. No transportation means no income, no shelter, and no recovery path. Even worse, impound lots often require valid registration, insurance, and ID documents that may already be compromised. If the vehicle isn't recovered quickly, it's auctioned or scrapped. This creates a one-strike system. There is no appeal window, no emergency housing backup, no safety net. What took months to barely stabilize collapses in 24 hours. After a tow, many workers fall into full street homelessness. Reemployment becomes nearly impossible without transportation. What began as a quiet survival strategy ends in total displacement. This is why vehicle bans are so dangerous. They don't correct behavior. They erase lives. Cities spend millions enforcing parking laws that destroy the only stability these workers have left. The irony is cruel. The system punishes people for finding shelter while offering no alternative. One tow doesn't just remove a car, it removes every path back to stability. Public perception assumes shelters are the solution. In reality, shelters are overwhelmed, underfunded, and often unusable for working people. Many operate at 95 to 100% capacity, with waitlists stretching weeks or months. Shelters often require check-in times that conflict with work shifts. Missing curfew can mean losing a bed. Others separate families by gender or age, forcing parents to choose between shelter and staying together. Safety is another barrier. Reports of theft, violence, and illness are common. Workers with tools, uniforms, or electronics risk losing everything overnight. For many, a locked car feels safer than a shared dorm. Shelters are also temporary. Stays are limited to 30 to 90 days, after which people are released back into the same housing market that failed them. Most critically, shelters do not solve affordability. They manage crisis, but don't restore housing access. Workers leave shelters still unable to afford rent. This is why millions choose cars over shelters, not because it's easy, but because it's the least bad option left. Shelters were designed for a different kind of homelessness. They cannot accommodate full-time workers who need security, storage, and schedule flexibility. The system offers temporary beds but not permanent solutions, leaving workers trapped between impossible choices. Living in a vehicle creates long-term health damage that rarely shows up in statistics. Sleep is fragmented and unsafe. Many vehicle dwellers average 4 to 5 hours of broken sleep per night, far below the recommended minimum. Chronic sleep deprivation increases the risk of heart disease by 48% and stroke by 15%, while people are still expected to work full-time. Temperature exposure is another silent threat. Cars offer little insulation. In summer, interior temperatures can exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. In winter, hypothermia risk rises sharply, especially for seniors. Medical visits are delayed because missing work means missing income. Mental health deteriorates fast. Constant fear of tickets, towing, and harassment creates sustained cortisol spikes. Anxiety, depression, and burnout are widespread, yet treatment is inaccessible. Many workers lose employer health insurance after reduced hours or job changes, leaving medical care unaffordable. Nutrition suffers too. Without refrigeration or cooking space, diets become carb-heavy and processed. Over time, this leads to weight gain, diabetes, and hypertension, conditions already rising among working-age adults. The most disturbing part, these people are not counted as medically vulnerable because they're employed. The system assumes work equals stability. In reality, car living quietly destroys physical and mental health while productivity demands remain unchanged. One of the fastest-growing segments of the working homeless is families with children. School districts across the U.S. report sharp increases in students classified as housing insecure, with many living in cars, vans, or motel parking lots. In some urban areas, 10 to 15% of homeless students now live in vehicles, not shelters. Parents work full-time while hiding their situation to avoid intervention. Fear of Child Protective Services keeps families invisible. Children do homework in back seats. Morning routines happen in gas station bathrooms. Sleep is irregular, and privacy doesn't exist. This instability directly impacts education. Studies show homeless students are 87% more likely to drop out and score significantly lower in reading and math. Chronic stress impairs memory and emotional regulation during critical development years. Shelters often separate families by gender or age, forcing impossible choices. Some parents choose vehicles to keep children together and maintain school continuity. But this comes at a cost: constant movement, fear of law enforcement, and unsafe environments. Long-term outcomes are severe. Children who experience housing instability are far more likely to face mental health challenges, reduced lifetime earnings, and continued housing insecurity as adults. This is how generational homelessness begins, not with addiction or neglect, but with working parents priced out of housing while doing everything right. Official numbers dramatically understate the crisis. Most homelessness data relies on shelter usage and street counts, methods that completely miss vehicle dwellers. People sleeping in cars deliberately avoid detection to stay safe and employed. Point-in-time counts happen once per year, often on a single night. If someone is parked in an industrial zone, rotating locations, or working overnight shifts, they aren't counted. As a result, real numbers may be 2 to 3 times higher than reported. Political incentives matter. Cities fear acknowledging scale because higher numbers require funding, housing commitments, and policy changes. Underreporting keeps budgets smaller and accountability limited. Media coverage also distorts reality. Cameras focus on tents, encampments, and visible street homelessness. Working families in vehicles don't fit the narrative, so they disappear from public awareness. This creates a dangerous illusion. Policymakers claim homelessness is declining while vehicle dwelling explodes. The problem isn't improving, it's changing form. When a crisis becomes invisible, it becomes easier to ignore. And when data fails, solutions fail too. America is not measuring what's actually happening, so it cannot fix it. The working homeless remain statistically invisible while their numbers grow, creating a blind spot that prevents meaningful intervention and allows the crisis to deepen unchecked. Once vehicle living is criminalized, people enter a punishment cycle that is nearly impossible to escape. It starts with a citation, then another. Fines accumulate faster than wages can cover them. Unpaid tickets lead to warrants, license suspensions, or vehicle impoundment. Without a valid license, workers can't commute legally. Lose the car, lose the job, lose any chance of housing. This loop doesn't reduce homelessness, it deepens it. Cities spend millions on enforcement while pushing people further into instability. Studies show punitive approaches increase long-term homelessness by 30 to 40%. Criminal records create permanent barriers. Employers reject applicants with warrants. Landlords deny housing based on citations unrelated to violence or theft, just survival. The system treats poverty as misconduct. Instead of addressing affordability, it penalizes coping mechanisms. The result is predictable: more displacement, more strain on emergency services, and higher public costs. Criminalization doesn't fix housing shortages. It just ensures people fall harder and stay down longer. Every citation pushes someone closer to complete collapse. Every warrant makes reemployment harder. Every impoundment removes the last asset between work and total homelessness. The criminalization loop doesn't rehabilitate or house people. It manufactures permanent poverty through escalating punishment for the crime of being unable to afford rent. All signals point to the crisis accelerating in 2026, not stabilizing. Housing costs are still rising, even as wages flatten. Property taxes increased sharply in many states, and homeowner insurance premiums jumped 15 to 30%, especially in urban and disaster-prone regions. Landlords are passing these costs directly to renters, driving another wave of rent hikes. Interest rates remain elevated, keeping home ownership out of reach for most workers and forcing more people into the rental market. This increases demand while supply stays limited. Affordable housing construction is years behind, and zoning reform is slow or blocked entirely. At the same time, cities are expanding vehicle dwelling bans, not relaxing them. More enforcement means more tickets, more tows, and faster collapses for people already on the edge. Social services are strained, with many programs facing budget cuts despite rising need. Layoffs are no longer isolated events. Short employment gaps, 30 to 60 days, are now enough to permanently remove workers from the housing market. Once displaced, re-entry is extremely difficult due to credit damage, background checks, and upfront move-in costs. The result is a pipeline: job disruption to housing loss, to vehicle living to criminalization. Without intervention, vehicle dwelling will no longer be a temporary survival strategy. It will become a permanent housing tier for millions of workers. This crisis is no longer confined to the margins. When full-time work can't guarantee housing, every worker becomes vulnerable. The difference between stability and homelessness is now often one rent increase, one medical expense, or one short layoff. Vehicle living is not a fringe phenomenon. It's a signal that the economic floor has collapsed. Teachers, nurses, drivers, technicians, and service workers are already living this reality. These are essential jobs. If they can't afford housing, the labor system itself becomes unstable. The long-term consequences are severe. Chronic stress, poor sleep, and declining health reduce productivity. Employers face higher turnover. Healthcare costs rise. Communities become less stable and more fragmented. This also reshapes behavior. Workers avoid risk, delay families, skip medical care, and accept worse conditions just to survive. Economic mobility stalls. The promise that hard work pays off breaks down. Most importantly, this crisis spreads quietly. Vehicle dwellers remain invisible until enforcement, illness, or job loss pushes them into full public homelessness. By then, recovery is far harder and more expensive for individuals and society. This is not about personal choices. It's about systems failing the people who keep them running. When work no longer equals shelter, the issue isn't homelessness. It's economic breakdown reaching the core of the workforce. If people who work full-time can't afford a place to sleep, something is seriously wrong. If you've seen this happening in your city, or if you're living it yourself, comment below. And watch our next video. We expose how cities are quietly cracking down on people living in their cars.